We're talking Charlotte 49ers today here on Sharpen the Point. 2024 was a 5-7 record. Biff Poggi, he's gone. Tim Albin comes in his first season after a highly successful tenure at Ohio, widely considered to be one of the better G5 coaches over the last couple of years. And he's going to bring in some interesting coordinators with him. He brings his Ohio linebacker coach to be the defensive coordinator. And at offensive coordinator is going to be Todd Fitch, who comes over from LSU as an offensive analyst. So he could have a little bit of firepower in there. Quarterback-wise, Max Brown, Deshaun Purdy, they both leave. Neither was the answer at all. And it's going to come as no surprise that he wanted change there. And it's a moderate shock to me, though, that he didn't get Parker Navarro, his quarterback from Ohio, as Navarro had a highly successful season a year ago. And it's really curious that he did not bring him with him. We've seen that work in the past, specifically last season with Kurt Cignetti bringing his guys to Indiana. Now, he didn't bring his quarterback either, but his quarterback ended up winning a second straight Conference Player of the Year title in the Sun Belt. But ultimately, it's in the spring, it was a two-man battle between two transfers, Connor Harrell from UNC and Grayson Loftus from Duke. Oddly enough, they're still battling one another, even though they're not right down the road anymore. Harrell fits the mold of what an Albin team consistently does on offense and what they do to be successful with the spread option attack. And Grayson Loftus is going to be a change of pace for that offense, right? He's more of a quality arm strength at all levels of the field type guy, but less mobile. Loftus was the first quarterback on the field during the spring game, take it for what it's worth. But I would expect Harrell to start early given his athletic capability of fleeing the pocket, throwing on the run, and his experience. Now, you're going to lose a little bit of the deep pass game with Harrell compared to Loftus, but that mobility is going to come in handy, specifically with where their offensive line's at currently. At running back-wise, the top three rushers, Cartavius Norton, Hassan Wilson, and Teron Kelman, all head for allegedly greener pastures. One could be argued that Norton's continuing that trend of moving, but I think he's exhausting his chances at this point. None of those were particularly impactful, even though Wilson was relatively okay on a per-carry basis. He just didn't have enough touches. There's a solid stable of backs in-house now, capable of producing in the backfield, though. Albin was able to keep some depth pieces in Henry Rutledge and Rod Gainey. Gainey has looked pretty decent. But it's the addition of Don Chaney. He comes over he was at Miami for a couple years, was at Louisville last year. He brings the most excitement. Chaney is a big back at 220 pounds. He's capable of handling a heavy workload, and he's going to get it. Sia Bangura got a heavy workload at Ohio previously. Albin teams have typically leaned on one workhorse, and I expect Chaney to get that right out of the gate. Now, Gainey's got juice, and he's slight of frame. He could see a complementary role behind Chaney, but it's going to be more of a 5 to 10 touch role, whereas I expect Chaney to be in that 20 touch a game role where he's just going to take a beating and dominate the touch counts. Pass catcher wise, they lose the top 5 wideouts and the top 2 tight ends from last year. But the only one of significance to me is Omega Blake. He heads to Arkansas. He was the clear big play threat. He didn't catch too many passes, but he had 800 yards and 9 touchdowns. So he was able to take the top off the defense, which is something they could have used in this offense moving forward. Now transfers are going to make up the core, with Jaden McGowan of Boston College likely being the top target for me, given his experience and presence in the slot. He's going to be an explosive weapon for them. And Nate Spillman of Tennessee should start on the outside. Justin Olson, who returns, he was down on the depth chart a year ago. He's made some strides. I think he could flank on the outside as well. Now, McGowan stood out in the spring, which was expected given the talent level in this room. He's a clear upgrade on the rest of the room. And Ejai Mason, he comes from Samford. I think he sees a role as well, and he has the capability to take that spot from Olson on the outside, leaving a ton of transfers being there. Now, Jake Young at tight end, he comes from Western Carolina, and then returning tight end Joey Burns. They're the top candidates to start at tight end. I think Young has all the upside, and he's the one to watch in this room as it grows. Along the offensive line, 4 of the 5 starters and the top 2 reserve linemen leave the room, with the lone holdover being center Johnny King. Now, he's the building piece, the building block that they're going to rely upon to lead this room. It's going to be an inexperienced group otherwise, and I think King was a key keep from the portal. He entered his name. He was kind of looking around a little bit, but he was a key keep for them in order to build along this offensive line. Now, the additions of Mason Bowers from Kennesaw State, Jesse Ramil, it says Mississippi State, but he came from James Madison. He started at James Madison last year. He made a little pit stop at Mississippi State. So we'll get into that in a little bit. Devin Davis, Omarion Davis, and then Rod Green from Purdue. They're going to add talent back to the room. Going back to Ramil, though, he's a talented player. He's a good player. He came in, transferred up to James Madison a year ago. He had a really inconsistent season, in my opinion, with JMU. He played well in spurts, but at other times he kind of looked a little lost out there. He probably should have stayed there. But that door closed when he left. He took a shot, went to Mississippi State after the season, and then quickly realized that there's levels to this, even at a bottom feeder SEC team. So, that's question marks. But outside of King, the starting center, the rest of the spots are up for grabs given all the additions. Most of them were late in the spring portal. So how this line shakes out is going to be a fun one to watch. There is some talent there, and I think they can be serviceable given what they've added. On the defensive side of the ball, it's going to be really interesting. The D-line, the entire depth chart is gone with the top 12 guys leaving. It's kind of insane how much turnover they had. Zion Shockley's the top returner, and he played roughly 100 snaps last season, and he's going to need to step into a larger role. Albin's been great at developing defensive linemen, so I think they can be decent, but it's going to come down to some additions here. Taz Williams, he comes from Utah State. He's going to make an early impact after coming in during the spring. He gets after the quarterback early and often, and he's pretty nasty between the lines. It's just keeping him right on the edge of going a little too far, but I like this kid a lot. The additions of edge rushers, Jalen Johnson and Braden Mullen, are going to help to get after the quarterback as well. And then Parker Starks, he comes from Ohio. Albin thought enough of him to bring him with him. I expect him to make an impact as well, and his role could grow as the season goes on. But right now, there's far more questions than answers currently along this defensive line, similar to the offensive line, right? We don't know along the lines of scrimmage what the heck is going on and who's going to be making an impact and how good they're going to be. At a linebacker core, there's one returning centerpiece overall for this defense, and that's Reed Wilford. He led the team in tackles. He's going to be leaned upon to lead this defense, and the rest of the linebacking core departed, though. It was just a massive boost for Albin bringing 3 guys from Ohio with him in this linebacking core with Stellan Bowman, Shea Taylor, and Caden Schmitz. All are impactful. I expect Taylor and Schmitz to have prominent roles alongside Williford, given their familiarity with this defensive scheme. And then Gavin Willis from Bucknell, he could be primed to make an impact as well, given he was just an absolute tackling machine there with 129 last season. This was a questionable unit last season, and by comparison, I think they're better this year, and it could be improved with all of these additions. This is probably the strength of the defense for me overall, is this second level. Now, at defensive back, they lose the top 3 corners and a safety, continuing the trend. But returning safeties Jaquarius Conley and Travion McGee, they're going to help stabilize the unit that struggled with giving up the deep ball last season. They were highly inconsistent. They struggled with that deep game, so they're going to need to improve in that area. Conley dealt with some eligibility issues last season, early on in the season last year. He came on really strong once those were resolved, and his head's now pretty clean. He feels good. His mental game's going to be a lot more improved without those question marks hanging over his head. He's going to be someone that can make a big impact. So he's our guy to watch as far as making the big impact on this defense during the course of the season. Now, while the addition of Caleb Curtin from Elon will be helpful given how much success he has had previously as well, he was a very good FCS safety, and then the defensive back, and then he's going to be a quality addition there. The corner spots are going to be extremely young, inexperienced. You can expect to see a lot of rotation early on in the season as they look to establish a core or even a rotation, depending. You have transfers in Ty Baldwin from Ball State, Gavin Shipman from Harvard, and Dwight Boodle from Nebraska. They're going to compete right away for playing time, but there's a lot of question marks on that outside as to who's going to play, but they're going to be able to have to do those type of things and test some things out and see who gets the job done early in the season. Looking at the schedule and outlook for this year, overall, the lines of scrimmage on both sides of the ball are the biggest question marks on the entire roster right now. They need to be answered. We need to figure out who's going to play and how well they're going to do is going to go a long way to determine how good this team can be. I have confidence that Albin can get there given his coaching track record, but how quick that happens is a question. He has had his struggles early on and he wasn't perfect, but he's gotten better as a coach and he's a heck of a coach. Overall, I expect them to be able to turn things around, especially with the recruiting base that he's going to be able to have here. Schedule-wise, App State early on, if that team is ever there for the taking, it's right now. It's a local rivalry-ish game that's going to grow in time. I think it's a coin flip. I think it's going to be an interesting game. I would be hesitant to call it either way. We'll see. App State's going to be interesting. UNC, you got to back Bill Belichick for right now. He's building something. Do they have the most talented roster? No, but it is not super talented for an ACC team, not an AAC team. There's a difference there. Monmouth, easy win. Rice, easy win. At South Florida, if Byron Brown's healthy, Byron Brown wins that game, that's a loss. At Army, they have a lot of turnover on offense. But I'm going to say that the lines of scrimmage issues and questions I have with Charlotte is going to be the difference in this game. Army's too tough in the trenches, and the system is too tough to overcome. So I think this is a loss until Albin can start getting used to playing these service academies year in and year out. Temple, I would lean a win. They're breaking in Casey Keeler. It's not a great roster. I expect Albin to be able to take care of business there. I believe Casey Keeler is nowhere near the coach Tim Albin is. That's personal bias probably as well. North Texas, that's a loss. That offense is too good. They're just not going to be able to hang with them. At East Carolina, same story, different team. I think that East Carolina's defense is more suspect than North Texas, and the offense isn't quite as good, but it's still a loss on the road. UTSA, loss. I mean, that is a murderer's row of offenses. North Texas, East Carolina, UTSA, and Georgia. That is a murderer's row of offenses that you do not want to take care of. And then at Tulane, that's a fun one. I think they lose the game. It's on the road. It's an awful end to the season for them. Brutal schedule to finish. But that's underrated. Maybe the best G5 coaching matchup of the year with Tim Albin and John Summerall. Those are two of the best. Albin's going to build this thing up. It's just a tough spot in year one, especially with that finishing schedule. It could very well be a step back from last year's record, but they're better positioned in the long run to be a factor in the AAC. 3 to 4 wins seems like the most likely outcome, but it's not going to shock me if they steal one and played a few teams a lot tougher than they expect, because Tim Albin's about to lead this thing in the right direction.